Hi, my name is Miss Kim, and I'm excited to share with you today, continuing our culture series from my personal background, which is the Native American culture. So I'm specifically going to teach you today the Blackfoot Native American culture, what they represent, and we're going to have a really great time continuing this project. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, again, so my name is Miss Kim, and let's go ahead and officially get started with our project. So as I explained, this is going to be an example of a Blackfoot Native American chief, which is a male warrior. And what you can see, what we're going to be using, we're going to be using some really cool materials today. So we're going to be using some feathers and acrylic paint and a Sharpie, okay? Also, you'll need a pencil, but I will guide you through each step. But I just wanted to show you an example of what your final project will look like, okay? So now what I'm going to do is, let's go ahead and get started with our first step, which is our practice draw. And what you'll need for your practice draw, again, is a pencil. Okay, now I'm just going to put my pencil right here, but I'm actually going to be using Sharpie so you can see as I draw the steps on the paper. Okay, but again, for your first step, you will definitely want to use a practice draw just in case you need to, make some corrections or erase lines. All right. Now, another thing that I'm going to do along the way is I'm going to explain to you some of the history of the Blackfoot Native American culture as I'm also sharing with you the steps, okay? But the first step that we're going to do is we're going to draw what's called a profile figure. And what the profile figure means is we're going to be drawing a side view of a male's head with his heavily adorned headpiece, okay? So the first thing that I'm going to start with is the letter backwards C. This is going to be a part of what's called the headband. So you just want to start with that, okay? And then from here, we're going to draw almost like a rainbow line, right to about there, okay? And then from here, we're going to start with the side profile of the figure's face. So I'm going to start with the forehead. So I'm going to come down slightly. And then right where the eyebrow and the eye meets, you can see it's going to have a little bit of an indentation. And then we're just going to come down and slightly curve that line. That's going to be the nose. And then continuing our nose, we're just going to curve that right here. Okay, and now we're going to start with the lips. So this is going to be the top lip. And then the bottom lip. And then the chin. So the chin's going to come all the way to here. Okay, and then I'm going to continue my chin to now what's called the jawline. And I'm going to stop right about here for the ear. Okay, so the jawline, and then stop. Okay, we're going to come back for the ear. We'll come back to that, but I want to continue with the line of the neck. So now right about here in the midway point of where the jaw and the chin are, I'm going to draw almost like a curved backward C to come down. Okay, and now we're going to continue on the back side of the head, the back side. So if we were drawing the head, okay, this is what the head would look like. So I'm just going to draw a straight line down and stop. Okay, so you can see this is the back of the head and the neck. And now we're going to draw the side profile of the person's body. So we're just going to draw the very top part of the neck where the chest is. So I'm just going to come down like so. Okay, now we're going to continue the decoration of the headband. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a really big circle right here because this is going to represent a part of the headband. So I'm just going to draw a really big circle like that and stop. Now, when we get into our final draw and final color, this line we will eventually erase. But again, I'm just showing you the steps, so that's why you can see my line right here. But that's okay for now. Okay, and then the headband, we're going to continue. So we're just going to connect this part of the headband to this part of that big circle. And then from here, we're going to continue the bottom half of that headband to that big part of the circle. Okay? And then the hairline will go here. And then the eyebrow. Now we're going to add the features of the face. So the eyebrow. And then we're going to draw a side profile of the eye. Okay. So almost like a side letter V. And then we're just going to make an oval for the eye. So the iris and the pupil. Okay, and then we'll eventually color this in. And then we're going to draw the nostril for the nose, like so. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to continue the headpiece, which are feathers. We'll paint this in, but this is again a part of the chief's headband. And you can see I'm just drawing almost like letter V's or little mountains. And they just kind of fan out like so. And then I'm just going to connect that last part right there. And then we're going to do the second tier of our headband. So these are just going to fan out almost like a palm tree branch. And I'm going to make 4 of these. So you see how they just kind of fan out almost like a palm tree. So 4 of these. And then I'm going to do 4 on the same side. Now, because this is such a really large headband, we're going to have to do a technique which is called cropping. So it's not going to be on the paper completely. So watch how I do that. We're going to just come off the paper for the first one and then come down. And we're going to go up. It's going to go off your paper. Continue down, up, off the paper, come down again. So now we have 3 of our what I call like palm tree looking branches. And then the 4th one, we're going to go off the paper and then come down and connect. Okay. And then the last step that we need to do is we need to connect this center part of our headpiece. And we're just going to draw almost like a curved line to represent crossing and connecting those 2 pieces together. Okay, so again, this is our first step, which is our practice draw. Okay, so if you've completed that, great job. We're going to now switch to our final draw. So I'm going to go a little bit faster for our final draw. Okay, so again, for your final draw, this is where we're going to add a few additional details. And again, you want to use a pencil. I'm going to again use a Sharpie just so you're able to see the lines that I'm actually drawing here, okay? And we're just going to add a few additional steps to our headband. So again, for my final draw, I'm going to start with that top part, which was the headband. And then that line again for the head. And then I'm going to draw the outline of the chief's profile. Okay, so as I'm just going through these steps very quickly, if you're curious to know, there were, but there are a lot of different what are called Native American tribes. The Blackfoot Native American Indian tribe and culture started many, many years ago in the United States. And it's actually now one have 10 existing what are now called um, reservations. And there are approximately 1.5 million acres of what are called reserved or preserved reservations for the Native American culture that live primarily there today in existence. They originated from what are called the American Great Plains, so that means that they formerly lived in the states of example like Montana, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, North and South Dakota. And today they also, the reservation actually exists also in Canada because it's so large. And again, it's been historically preserved, so it is able to, help keep the nation of the Blackfoot Native American tribe alive and thriving and still having, the culture and people in existence today. Now, if you're also curious to know why are they called or why are we called Blackfoot Native Americans, is because Blackfoot is actually what's called the English translation of the original word, which is called Siksika, Siksika, Siksika. And that means the people with black moccasins. So, what that means basically is in a lot of other Native American um, tribes, they wore what are called light beige moccasins. Moccasins are basically shoes made of animal skins that you wear on your feet. Now, the Blackfoot Native Americans, they actually, one, either dyed theirs really dark, or because they were very I don't want to say thrifty, but they used a lot of their materials and they like to recycle. So they had their teepees, and sometimes because when they lived in their teepees, which are basically tents today, we know them more of tents, their homes, they actually would have a lot of fire and smoke inside of them, and smoke and fire draws up. So because of the black smoke on the teepees, they would cut the top halves off of the teepees, and that's how they would make their moccasins, and that's how the name Blackfoot originated. So, fun fact for you. Okay, so again, that's just a little bit of history. Now, as you noticed, I have completed my final draw, and what we're going to do now is we're going to add a few additional details to our headband. Now, as I mentioned earlier, okay, I'm just going to draw, starting on this part right here, just another copycat line, okay, which is going to represent a part of the design of our headband. And then I'm just going to draw one more circle right here for the headband. Okay, now for this part of the headband, I'm going to draw another circle, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to do another copycat line. So I'm just going to go around like that. Okay. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to draw a series of what are called like the letter V. And I'm just going to make almost like a star-like pattern around my headband. So notice that my letter V, my upside down V, it's not going to touch the circle. It's just going to come almost to that inside circle. So I'm just going to continue to cross that. And I'm just going to go around the whole circle. Now, you are more than welcome to make your own design, but this is actually a very common design that the Blackfoot Indians actually used in their artwork, because they were actually very skilled artists and people who did a lot of crafts. So this was a very typical or common pattern that they would use in their embroidery when they would make their headbands. Okay, so that again is the final draw of what your chief would look like. And then again, what I'm going to do now is just so you can see, this is what yours will look like. Okay, So again, this is what yours would look like in pencil. So I'm going to just very quickly go through this in pencil, and then I'm going to show you the next step so we can move forward with our coloring. Okay, so one more time, I'm just going to outline these pencil lines. So this is a good time for you to follow along with me, so this is what yours would look like in pencil. And you can also see that I had erased that other line before. So we're just going to go over all of our lines in Sharpie, okay? So we're just going to go over all the lines in pencil, and we're going to just outline everything in the Sharpie, okay? So as we're almost done with our final draw, okay, we're going to use some specific colors that I've picked out for us. But again, you're more than welcome to use different colors. But as I select the colors that I will be sharing with you momentarily, I will also share with you the reason why I am choosing these specific colors. Because again, in the Blackfoot culture, colors represented a lot as far as meanings in their lifestyle and why they were of great significance and importance to them. So again, we're just going to go over this part of our headband. Now, another fact for you is with the Blackfoot Native American tribe or culture, the chief was primarily a male figure. He was a male, a man. And they, meaning the Blackfoot culture, they actually were unique from a lot of other Native American tribes because they wore headbands such as the one that we're drawing right here that were actually more, they like to have theirs more higher. So you can see that's why ours is kind of going really high off the paper versus a lot of other Native American tribes. Maybe, for example, you've heard of a Native American tribe called the Sioux tribe. Now, they had headbands that were much longer. They would go literally all the way down to the ground. Whereas the Blackfoot Indians, they decided they wanted to build theirs up really, really high, kind of like a skyscraper, like New York, right? So just wanted to share that interesting fact with you. Now, as we are almost done with our final draw outline, okay, and again, we want to add our final design here. So again, feel free if you've made your own design, you're more than free to do that, but I'm just going to stick with the traditional design. Okay. All right, so we are now complete with our final draw. Now, before we get started with our color, what I wanted to share with you next, and oops, you know, I actually forgot one little line right here. I forgot to draw this part of our headband. Okay, now if you're looking at my paper and it looks a little jagged in a few of the areas, it's because it is, because we need to actually now take our final draw and we need to cut 3 sections of our paper because this is where we're going to insert our feathers for our design work. So I already pre-cut mine, but the first area that I cut is right here in the front half of this headband. So just take, you know, any common pair of scissors, okay? And what you want to do, is okay if you have to like make a little bit of an indenture or a hole. I would say just start on the background part. You don't want to put a hole in your actual person or the profile. So I just kind of punched a hole right here, and then I just cut to almost where that part of the circle is, okay? So again, the reason why we're doing this is because this is going to be much easier for us to insert our feathers when we're done painting our figure, okay? The next area that you want to cut is right here along this part of the headband. So again, I would just start with creating a hole. I'm just trying to move my hand. Create a hole right here and just cut alongside the headband till it comes right here. Okay, so you can see that's where the second part is. And then we're going to add feathers on the very, very top. So again, punch a hole right here. And then you're just going to cut across. Okay? So again, 3 areas to where we need to insert our feathers once we're done painting. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Great job. Now, we are going to start with our final color. Okay? Now again, I'm using acrylic paint. I would advise acrylic paint. Now, if you don't have acrylic paint at home, that's okay. Just try your best to use any other materials that you have that are going to be what are called really vibrant colors because, again, colors represented a lot to the Blackfoot Native American tribe. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little different. We're going to actually paint or start with our background. Okay? Now, what you need is, let's see here, just looking through all of my materials. Okay, so I'm using a paper plate as my palette, and if you do have acrylic paints, I'm using what's called like Liquitex brand, and this is going to be a light blue. So this color is already pre-made. Again, it's a light blue. Okay. And I'm going to use a big brush. So I'm actually going to paint my background first because it's going to be much easier to fill in the portrait once we finish our background. Okay. So I'm just going to start with my light blue. Okay, and we're just going to fill in our entire background with light blue paint. Now, let me see. What else can I share with you? So as we're painting this together, okay, let's see. Another fun fact about the Blackfoot tribe is, again, as you know, they live and still do exist and live in the what are called the American Great Plains. Now, historically, they lived in teepees. Now, teepees to us today are more like what are known as tents. And the reason why they lived in tents is because, or not tents, but teepees, is because they were very easy to assemble and break down if they needed to move because they actually moved around quite a bit back in the early days because they had to find or settle in a land that was considered their own because they had a little bit of trouble and conflict of having the home of their own. So that's why if they were, again, have to move, then they would be able to just to upwardly take those poles because they use really long, tall poles, like 15, 20 feet poles, and then they would just affix their homes, the teepee skin, to the poles, and then they would decorate them with beautiful colors. And the teepees were actually made out of animal skins because the Blackfoot culture, they actually were great huntsmen. That's what they're known for, as being skilled hunters and warriors, actually, because they had to actually defend themselves quite a bit to consider a place of their own to be home. So they had to learn how to, protect their land and their rights as a culture, as a people. Now, the common animal, or because again they did hunt because they had to live off of what they hunted for, which means that's what they had to eat, as well as that's how they made all of their clothing. So buffalo was their primary animal of choice I guess you would say, as far as how they would survive. And they used a lot of skins from buffalo, which is known as bison, and they would use the skins to make all of their clothing. And then the men, they wore what we would call leggings today, and they also wore heavily detailed embroidered shirts. That's an easy way to say it. And then the women, they actually, again, would use the same animal skins, buffalo skins, and then they would actually create or make really long dresses. And again, as I mentioned, the Native American or Blackfoot tribes were known to be hunters, and they were also known for being really great artists. And they were skilled in crafts as well. So they were really historically known for creating quilts. So they would actually embroider all their clothes, and they would decorate their clothing as well as their moccasins. Remember, their moccasins were their shoes. And they would actually use glass beads. So pretty sophisticated for that time frame. They would use glass beads to decorate. They would also use, again, the skins from buffalo, from elk, from deer, and antelope. So they were very resourceful. I know that may be somewhat controversial today, but remember, this was many, many, many years ago when that was just the common way of life as far as having to utilize animals to exist. And not only did they use the clothing, I mean the animal skins to furbish their clothing, but they also used the animals because that's how they survived as far as eating. Okay, so when they would eat, or what I would say main consumption of food again was bison or buffalo, and they also hunted deer. They hunted elks and rabbits. And then they would also, depended on the season. So, for example, when it was a warmer season or warmer climate, like in the spring and the summer, the ladies of the tribes would actually go out and they would hunt and look for, not hunt, excuse me, they would find berries. And then they would also, in the winter time, because again, food was very scarce, they had to basically find their own food. It's not like they could go to a grocery store. So in the winters, now remember, they were up in the Midwest, and it gets really, really cold in the Midwest. So they had to survive off of a food which was known as pemmican. And pemmican was consisted of it was dried meat, so like dried bison meat, almost kind of like what we would know today as like a beef jerky. But then the pemmican would also consist of berries, and then they would take the fat because again they had to survive those really cold, harsh climates. So they needed the animal fat to help them stay warm as well. So again, they were very resourceful. They did not waste. So anything that they would hunt, they would actually use it to feed themselves as well. So they really utilized all of their resources to the max. Okay, so fun fact for you there. And again, this is not to offend anyone, but this is how the culture existed as far as living. So for those of you who are kind of more, sensitive about animals, that was just the way of life for the Native American culture, okay? Now, I'm almost done with my background, and you can just see I'm just going to switch to a little bit of a smaller brush just so I can get around the details of the smaller areas. Okay, and again, I'm using a light blue. Now, remember how I mentioned earlier that colors were a very significant part of the Blackfoot culture, is because colors really represented a lot when it came to how they would celebrate, because they also like to do a lot of what's the word I want to say? Well, they used a lot of colors when it came to like their seasons of Celebration. They were also very what are called spiritual people. I won't get into that too much, but that was really important as far as their existence and how they lived as a culture. Now, again, the reason why I wanted to mention colors is because colors means a lot as far as what they represented. So blue, the color blue, whether it's a light blue, a dark blue, but since we're using blue for our background, blue represents the heavens and skies to Native American, or excuse me, to the Blackfoot tribe. And again, the color also represents wisdom and confidence. So that's why blue was really important to them. Okay. All right, so now we've completed our background. And if you have a little bit of a border or kind of like your paint coming on the background of your table like me, that's okay. So now we're going to switch our colors and then we're going to use our next color. I'm going to start with the skin, okay? So for my skin tone, okay, I'm going to use this light brown, okay? And we just need just a little bit for that. Now for this skin tone, let's see, I believe I will use, I'm gonna use my large brush. So make sure if you have your dark brush, you wanna clean out that light blue paint. And if you can see how I'm just cleaning mine here. So I'm just gonna take my light brown and I'm done with my light blue. So I'm just gonna put that to the side. Okay, so now I'm just gonna paint the face. Again, we're painting the inside of the profile of the face. And this is just their skin tone. So, and again, if you feel more confident of using a smaller brush, then please feel free to do that. Okay. So again, as we're continuing this, painting the skin tone, what I was saying is in the Blackfoot Native American culture, um, because they did do a lot of ceremonies and dancing, that was really important to them. Um, they also had what was known as music and ceremonies, as I was saying earlier, was really important and still is very important today to the tribe. And they would frequently hold dances in the summer seasons that would reflect, their culture, which would emphasize hunting and war, because again, war, they had to defend themselves quite a bit for their land. And they would also celebrate and honor different members of their tribes through their dances, which is called a sun dance. And they did that because that represented, specific members of the tribe that were maybe brave. Maybe they went out and, saved lives of other tribe members, or they defended a certain segment of land. So again, that was really important. They would celebrate them through dance, again called a sun dance. And they also like to honor those who represented not only bravery, but skill and generosity. Because again, they shared a lot of what they had amongst the people. So for those who were found to be very generous, they also like to honor and celebrate them for that as well. And then interesting, the sun dance would actually also, again, interpret into like rites of passage for the younger boys that were coming up in the Blackfoot culture. So that was like what's called a rite of passage. In a lot of cultures, they have different ceremonies for the kids who are, starting to become not just a child, but turning into a teenager and adult. So that was another reason why dance and celebration and ceremonies was really important to the Native American culture of specifically the Blackfoot. And they would often have this dance that would last for 4 days. So it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It would last for many, many days. Now, as you can see, I'm painting and talking. I've switched my paintbrush to a smaller brush because I need to get into the smaller detailed areas of our warrior here, or our chief, excuse me. Okay, so I'm almost done with that. Now again, I'm using a light brown for the skin tone. Now you're more than welcome to use any other colors that you may have that would represent a skin tone. I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so there we go. We have now completed the skin tone. Now I'm done with that. So next step is we're going to, let's paint our top part of our headband. So we're going to, I'm sorry, I pointed to the wrong thing. So I'm going to paint the top part of this headband. So I'm going to actually use the same light brown, but now I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of white because again, I too want to be resourceful and I don't want to waste any materials. So we're just going to mix our light brown with white. Okay, and I'm just going to mix that together here on my plate. Make sure you can see how I'm doing that. Okay. And when it gets to be a little bit of a lighter shade, that's good. Now we're going to paint this bottom half of our headband. Because this represents feathers. Now this part of the headband was primarily, no, I don't have real feathers for this, but we're just going to paint this part. But feathers this is representing these were feathers from eagles. So that's why I'm using a little bit of a lighter beige for this color. Because again, remember, every object, every item that the Blackfoot culture used, it had a very significant importance to them. Now for your project, you can change this color to any color that you would like. So feel free to do whatever color you would like to use. Okay, so almost done with that. Okay. And again, you can see that I'm using a little bit of a smaller brush because it's easier for me to get around into these little smaller areas. Okay, now what I'm going to use next is I'm going to get dark brown. Okay, and I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of dark brown. Okay, and again, being resourceful, we're going to now take this dark brown and I'm going to mix it into my light brown that I just made, almost like a beige. And this is going to be the fanned out part, what I called earlier, almost like a palm tree. So I'm just going to use this color to paint this part of the headband. Okay. So let's see, what else can I share with you? I think we talked about the food. Oh, I know, another thing that I wanted to share with you is with the Blackfoot tribe. So they experienced what I call severity in weather conditions. So Their summers were really hot, and then their winters were very, very cold. And remember, they primarily existed outdoors, so they had to learn how to withstand all of these different weather conditions. So in the summer, they would wear, again, as I mentioned earlier, the clothing made out of animal skins. And it would just depend. Like the children, they would wear sometimes just coverings for their bottoms and their top half of their body. Same with the men and the women. But then in the winters, they would have to dress much, much warmer. So they would actually use, again, the animal skins, and they would use the thickest part of an animal, and then they would cover themselves almost like in what's called a blanket. So they would stay really warm. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, they were really into designing and decorating their clothing. So they would often use beautiful colors. Like I mentioned earlier, they would use beads, excuse me, glass beads. They would also wear heavily decorated necklaces, and the necklaces that men and sometimes women would wear were made out of claws, like bear claws. Sometimes they would use teeth from the animals that they would that they would hunt, because that again represents that they were skilled hunters. They would use grass, like dried grass, which was called sweet grass, and then porcupine quills. Could you imagine? You have to be really careful wearing porcupines because you would poke yourself. But I guess they knew how to do that. So those are real facts. All right, so our headband is almost done. So now you can see that I'm going to switch. Now we're going to start filling in our, let's see, let's do this part. We're going to use some brighter colors for the headband piece, okay? Now remember how I mentioned earlier, colors are of significance. So the first color I'm going to select is, I'm going to mix green. Okay, so let me get my plate here. I'm going to take a little bit of green. This is dark green. And I'm going to use aqua. So I'm just going to mix two colors. Now, if you want to keep yours very simple, then definitely feel free. But I'm mixing these two colors because this is going to make more of a, like a turquoise color. Okay. Whoops, I forgot. Let me mix this so you can see. And again, in the Native American culture, just in general, you can see that there's a lot of turquoise that is used. So we're going to use this color, blue-green turquoise, in our project as well. So I'm going to use this color to paint this part, so the inside of this headband. Now, remember how I mentioned earlier that the color blue, that represents wisdom, confidence, also heavens and skies. Now the color green, that represents spring and new growth. It's also important to them because it represents just nature in general, because remember they were very fond of the outdoors. That was their way of life. Harmony is another significant meaning for the color green to them. Healing and endurance. So that's what the color green represents. So we're mixing blue and green together. Okay, now I'm also going to paint this part of my headband. Oops. So we're just going to paint that part green or blue-green. And we are almost done with this part as well. Okay. So we have that part. Let me think. So this is green. This is going to be dark brown. Just making sure I have all my colors. So yeah, that's all we need for this color. Okay, so I'm going to put this color to the side. And I'm actually, let's see. Let me just put this right here so we don't see that. All right, so now let's clean our brushes. And the next color I'm going to use is red. So red, again, is another very important color because red represents what they would again define. Red represents the blood that ran through their veins and their ancestors because they really, really look to their ancestors, or they would depend on what's called like their history for wisdom and guidance. And that was always important to honor their ancestors. So that's why red was really important. Red also represents protection from harm. So that was another important significance of the color red. It also represented faith, energy, beauty, and of course, war, because people always associate red with war, and they also associated red with war as well. So really important representation. Okay, so we have that color. For red. Okay, and again, you can see I'm still using my small brush. Now I'm going to paint let's see. Let's paint this part. We're going to paint this part red as well. And as I mentioned earlier, you can use any color you would like. So interesting with the Blackfoot Native American tribe, I'm sure before the color wheel was invented, interesting because they're using complementary colors. And you see how they have the red and the green? Okay, and then, yeah, and then we're going to paint this part red as well. Okay. So the reason why I really wanted us to paint our background first is because we're going to be we're going to be using feathers. And I really wanted to make sure that our background is completely dry before we start gluing and taping our feathers down. But that's one of the benefits of acrylic paint is they dry fast. And that's another reason why you want to keep your brushes in the water, because you don't want to just keep them hanging out like that because the paint will dry on your bristles and you cannot get it out. Okay? Okay. So we're almost done. And let's see. So as we are almost done with that part, so let's see, what else can I tell you? So I know in the culture of the Blackfoot tribe, what I would say like everyday life, somewhat similar to today's standards. So for example, the children, they went to school and they learned a lot from their parents, but they would have the kids gather in groups amongst, the tribes, and they would go to school. They like to play. I know that they made a lot of their own toys, like they would make dolls. They enjoyed going hunting and fishing. um, with the families as well. And they were really big into storytelling. So oftentimes they would gather around fires, and then the elders of the tribes would tell stories of, again, their ancestors, as well as like events that were occurring in their present day. And then they loved music, so they had different drums that they would make, and then they would also like to use what are called horned instruments. So they would make their own horned instruments out of different parts of the tree. All right, so that is our colors, the brightest colors that we'll use as far as the paint. So now we're going to fill in the remaining part of our project. So we need to finish our headband, and we're just going to color this part simply black. So now I'm going to get a dark brown. Okay. And I'm just going to fill in this last part of my design with the dark brown. Now, as you're painting your project, now if you want to go back over your project later, because I know sometimes with acrylic paint, it if you add a layer, once your first layer is dry, sometimes that really enhances and makes the colors stand out a lot more. But for the sake of our project, we're just going to do one layer. But again, if you want to go back and add another layer, please feel free to do so. It'll just really make your colors that much more vibrant, and it'll really make them stand out a lot more if you would like to. Again, that's just an option. You don't have to, but if you would like to, then definitely feel free. Okay, so I'm almost done with this part. Then we will add, okay, dark brown to the very top part of the headband, or excuse me, the headdress. So this is going to be dark brown. Okay. And mirror. Okay, so this part, perfect. That part is almost dry. So I'm just going to add a few additional details to this part of my headband. Okay. If you notice, I'm just kind of rubbing this. So this should be dry by now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of my dark brown, and I'm just going to add just some simple lines, almost kind of like you're fanning these lines for the headband, or the head. I keep calling the headband, the headdress. So just kind of fan my lines out like that. Now again, this is optional. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to, but I just think it adds a nice additional step or design to our chief's headdress. And again, that's dark brown. Okay. Now I'm done with my small brush, and I'm going to switch back to my large brush. And we're just going to paint both this part and that part dark brown. Okay. Now if you feel more confident in using a smaller brush, again, feel free to do that. Be my guest. It's nice just to kind of keep your brush strokes consistent. As you can see, I'm just kind of going from top to bottom and then bottom to top, just so I can keep my brush strokes nice and smooth. Like that. And we're just going to go around that part. Okay. Okay, so we're almost done with that part, or you should be done with that part of your headband. Okay, and that should actually be the final step for that part of the headband. And just one more time, I'm going to switch back and I'm going to paint this part of the eye. That's going to be dark brown because they often had dark brown eyes. Now, if you want to change the eye color of your eyes, feel free, but I'm going to use dark brown. Okay. And now, for my second to last step, as far as painting, I'm going to take my medium-sized brush and I'm going to actually take black paint. Okay. And I'm going to paint the top here, the shirt of our profile. So I'm just going to paint that really quick with black. Oops. And almost done with that. Okay, perfect. So you should have that part. And then I'm going to paint the hair, or this part of the hair. Now for our project, we're just going to keep the hairline very simple because we're going to be adding a lot of feathers. But for the hairstyles, the Blackfoot tribe, now they were historically known for having long, long hair. And the men even wore their hair in braids, like two braids, braid to the side. Same with the ladies. But for our project, we'll just keep it simple for today. But if you've seen pictures, you can see how oftentimes they had really long hair with the braids, and that is very true today. And again, just a fun fact for you, again, because again, with my personal background heritage, I saw pictures of my great-grandmother, and she had long hair. It was really, really long. It was actually down her waist, almost down to her knees. That's how long her hair was. So I thought that was really cool to see that picture. All right, now, oops, let's keep that straight. We are officially done with our painting steps, okay? So I'm just gonna put my paint over here to the side. And now here comes the really fun part, which is the feathers. Okay, so again, oops. I'm just gonna pull my feathers in. Now, I actually got my feathers from the Dollar Tree, and it was literally just one pack. So $1 for one pack of feathers. That's a great deal. So again, I'm going to utilize red, orange, and yellow. Now, I did not mention earlier because I was waiting to share this with you. So yellow and orange. So for the color yellow, that represents the sun. It also represented power to create and make things grow. So that was the importance of yellow. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add 3 yellow feathers to this top part of the of the headdress. Okay, so remember how we cut this in here earlier? Now to make it simple, you actually don't need a lot of glue. What I did is I'm just going to put these in here, and I'm just going to affix 3 of them. And you know what I do is I take tape. I have double-sided tape, but if you have just a regular sided tape, that's fine. And I just kind of cheat, as I call it, I cheat, and I just put the tape right here on the back. And then one more, that's why I like to use the double stick tape. And I just kind of use, whoops, the double stick tape. And I should have did this first actually. And just kind of put the tape, just like so. Okay. So there you have it. You have your 3 feathers right here on the top. Now, if you want to add more, please feel free to do that. If you want to even maybe mix different colors in here, you can. But for my project, I'm actually just going to use it very simply. Okay, I'm just going to now put tape here on the background. Now, if you don't have tape, if you have glue instead, again, if you have glue, you can use glue, but I personally find the tape to be easier because it goes faster. And I'm just going to put little strips along this background side, okay? Just tape it, tape it, tape it all around that side, okay? Now, first color I'm going to use is red. So now I'm going to start to use red. I'm just going to tape one here. And then remember how we cut that part? I'm going to tape here. Tape one here. And so that's a total of 4 red feathers. Okay. Next color is orange. And then again, the importance of the color orange, that represents intellect and determination. So that was the importance of orange. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 orange feathers. Okay, now you can see why we kind of cut that out, because it just makes the feathers lie much nicer along the back side. And then we're going to use again yellow. Oops, I think I need one more piece of tape just to make that stick. Okay. And you know what, actually, if you wanted to, I did not do this earlier, but if you wanted to add, now you can just poke a little tiny hole right here. As long as your paint is dry, you should be okay. So we're just going to add another little tiny hole just along this side. Okay, so again, I didn't do this hole earlier, but I forgot we need to put one right here along this part of the headdress. Okay, we're almost done. And then we're just going to add a feather right here. So 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And then for our last step, I'm just going to tape some right here. And this part will just go right here. So 1, and it doesn't matter which order you put your colors or your feathers. Again, if you have different colors you want to use, you can definitely use those. Just have fun and be really creative. as long as they're bright colors. That's the important part because they really love to use bright colors in their decorations and designs. Okay, so now there we have it. So we have created our Blackfoot Native American chief warrior head design. And I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you so much.